So, Mr. Mayor, we'll move on to question from Assembly Member Russell, which is about honest conversation with Londoners about funding transport. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I always believe politicians should be honest with the public, and that's why I'll never downplay or shy away from acknowledging the difficult path ahead. I've been open with Londoners about the challenges TfL faces and the conversations I've been having with the government. It's clear that the months and perhaps years ahead are going to be extremely tough. We don't yet know what the full extent of the impacts of the pandemic on London will be, or how much of the change we've already seen in the way people travel will remain in the longer term. This is the biggest crisis London has faced since World War II. History shows us that London has always survived and indeed come out stronger after a crisis, but we need government to work with us to ensure this happens. It's essential that all cities across the country receive the support that they need. The government has a responsibility to provide the public funding required to support our economy through this period. I can assure you that I'll continue to put pressure on the government to fulfil this responsibility. Earlier this month, we announced a TfL funding agreement with the government. This is forecast to be around £1.8 billion, depending on actual levels of passenger revenue. And this agreement will enable TfL to continue to support the capital for the remainder of the financial year as we continue discussions on a long-term deal. In agreeing this deal, I was able to secure the removal of some of the more damaging requirements initially proposed by the government, for example, to remove free travel for under 18s. I have an ambitious goal for 80% of journeys being made on foot, by cycle or using public transport by 2041. To achieve this, we need a long-term sustainable funding model for TfL. It's clear to me that the current model, which is dependent on fares income to make up over 70% of TfL's revenue, is not fit for purpose. This is higher than any other European city and much higher than any other global city like New York.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I fully agree with you that the current fares-based funding model is not sustainable. Now, Londoners might look at the recent fuss over the government-proposed enlargement of the congestion charge area and wonder why so many politicians were rushing to defend so many needless short journeys by car. Now, I agree a congestion charge area wouldn't have been a realistic way to cut traffic and wouldn't have been effective or fair, but pay per mile emission-based road pricing would be. So are you ready to open up a conversation with Londoners about how people driving can contribute their cost of keeping London moving?
Thank you. The reception wasn't great, but I think I got the gist of the question. So in my mayor's transport strategy in 2018, I think I set out that our team is keeping under review this issue of what's called road pricing. Look at other criteria: distance-driven, emissions, time, road dangers, and the like. Our focus, though, was firstly when I announced in 2017 the world's first ultra-low emission zone, to make sure it was successful in 2019, and it was. We're now rolling that out to an area 18 times the size of the C-Charge area from October 2021. And we need that to be a success. So our focus is getting the ultra-low emission zone extended and for that to be successful. But at the same time, TfL, as said in my mayor's transport strategy, of course keeps these things under review.
Under review, it's not really good enough. At the weekend, the Treasury briefed journalists about replacing fuel duty income with road pricing. I've tried politely to remind you of the need to take a lead on road pricing. Professor Tony Travers came to this assembly in 2018 and said to my colleague Sean Berry, and I quote, on the topic of smart fare road pricing, "My slight fear is that the powers do exist for the Mayor of London, and if they are not used, the nation will at some point," end quote. You've got the powers, Mr. Mayor. Are you going to use them or lose them?
Well, heaven forbid I disagree with Professor Travers, but I couldn't be clearer. So my mayor's transport strategy sets out that we investigate all sorts of new technologies, but our focus has to lead to make the ULEZ successful in the rollout. And you will be aware, lots of people were saying we couldn't implement the world's first ultra-low emission zone. We did it because our focus is on that. we've got to make sure we're going to go from an area the size of the central London area to an area 18 times that. And so our current focus is to make sure we can make that a success, and that goes live in October 2021. No guarantees, by the way, that'll be as successful as the first rollout was in April
Mr. Mayor, I'm
2019.
sorry.
But in relation
Mr.
to
Mayor,
investigating...
I'm worried that
road-
you're missing the boat, because Tony Travers went on to say, if the national government decided to introduce a national system of road pricing, most of it in cities, it gets the revenue. That is the risk for all London politicians in the medium to long term, end quote. Tony Travers warned you 2 years ago, you need to innovate on or you risk losing even your existing charging income. Smart, fair, privacy-friendly road pricing is an idea whose time has come, and the government seems to get that now. So given these rumours, isn't it time to start that conversation about road pricing now?
So just for clarity, Chair, is the Green Party policy to introduce road pricing now, even though we lose £500 million from London by Londoners paying vehicle excise duty that leaves our city. The Green Party policy now is, while we're still trying to introduce the world's biggest ultra-low emission zone area on the success of the first one, don't do that, but instead put all our eggs into the road pricing basket. And it's also Green Party policy, it appears, even though no other city, forget the size of London, but even a smaller city has brought in road pricing, to jump in with both feet to do road pricing in London, an area covering 9 million Londoners, even though it's not been tried and tested everywhere. With the great respect to the Green Party, I will reject their advice to introduce road pricing now. What I'll continue to do, as set out in my Mayor's transport strategy, is to investigate various other new technologies, whilst at the same time building on the huge success of the ultra-low emission that has led to a massive reduction in nitrogen dioxide, that's led to 94% fewer homes being in areas where the area is unlawful, and 97% fewer schools being in areas where the area is unlawful. An example of delivering rather than having abstract debates based on what the wonderful Professor Travers may have said.
Mr. Mayor, we just need to have that honest conversation about paying for transport. Everyone getting around our city needs to be paying their share, and that includes people driving, but it needs to be a fair way of doing it. And the danger is that you miss that opportunity to get that income from road pricing, because the government brings in a scheme first and takes that money to replace what you've rightly identified as that loss in VED. So, but I'm out of time now, so I have no further questions.